Here we are. And this week, who's hosting?
I thought you were hosting, aren't you?
No,
I thought you just started.
it's you.
All right. Well, so shall I start then?
Yeah, let's start again. Yeah.
Okay. So this week we're talking about meditation. Last week, if you remember, last episode we spoke about how it was on learning the craft, where Lama Jumpa talks about hearing, thinking, and meditating, and it sort of marks a inflection point in the book, where previously talking about some of the opportunities and challenges coming to the West, but now it's sort of talking more about a little bit more content about Buddhism and Buddha Dharma, and meditation is obviously a very key part of the Buddhist path. But then in this chapter, it's sort of comparing, I guess, what meditation means in Buddhism versus some of this big popularity of meditation in the West. So maybe just to get us going, Lama Jumpa mentions the McMindfulness boom, as he puts it quite early on. Adrian, what's this mindfulness thing all about?
Yeah, well, mindfulness is obviously a Buddhist a term we use in Buddhism a lot, and it's an English word that translates some of these key concepts from Buddhism. Within Buddhism, it's always placed within this broader context, not just of meditation, but of ethical discipline, meditation, and wisdom. The three trainings, as they're called, which are referenced in this chapter. But the McMindfulness is a sort of jokey term to indicate the McDonald'sification, turning Buddhism into a sort of McDonald's mass production, mass replication, cheap franchise, roll it out, sort of Western capitalist model or assimilation of Buddhism, transforming Buddhism from a spiritual tradition into a business, I think. Because mindfulness has been an incredibly successful business. You can get apps on your phone now. You can pay monthly fees to be reminded to be mindful of something, like going to the gym or by having a membership at the gym or something. It was brought from the Theravada tradition, where it existed in an authentic, mindfulness existed in its authentic context, and then it was brought out of that, taken out of that authentic context, and placed into a sort of Western capitalistic consumerist model, and has been incredibly successful. And I suppose its key characteristic, as he says, is it explicitly divorces itself from Buddhism and makes it entirely about secular goals and aims, like, material happiness, material success, de-stressing, being good at your job, and stuff like that. So that's my understanding of what McMindfulness is. Is that right?
Yes, yeah, thanks. So Norin, what's wrong with that then? Is meditation, can it be a good thing? Can it help people in that way?
I think a lot of it was well-intentioned.
That's generous.
The mindfulness movement was well-intentioned.
Generous.
But the road to hell, what is it? The road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? So to me, there's two different types of the mindfulness-ness. One is the type that you kind of see in your workplace, where they do some kind of session where it's like, all right, we're all just going to sit and just, like, still our minds for a moment before we proceed. It's like a prelude to something.
And now gently open your eyes and notice how you feel. You've just completed the meditation session. This practice will help make you more mindful of when you become distracted during work, school, or when you require yourself to be more focused.
To make you, the goal there being to make you more productive in your job, which is shady. But there's another side to it in the whole psychotherapy movement, which came out of I think cognitive behavioral therapy, which is huge, and Dialectical behavioral therapy, which is a branch of cognitive behavioral therapy. And it is like, it underpins a lot of psychotherapy that is prevalent, contemporary psychotherapy. And that itself came from the mindfulness. It's, if you look it up, DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, the core foundation of it is mindfulness. And the person that founded that movement was very open about, like, you know, they got it, they were inspired by Buddhism, but they wanted to strip away any religious component to it to make it more accessible to people.
In our current research, we are finding that the skills that are taught in dialectical behavior therapy may be the most critical parts of the entire treatment. The skills that we teach are in 4 groups. So the first group is mindfulness skills. DBT was actually the first psychotherapy that put mindfulness into psychotherapy.
But to go back to Paul's question, what's wrong with that? If it's just you avoided answering that difficult question.
Right. So what's wrong with it is that it's just stripping Buddhism of its context. And the whole point is that mindfulness, it wasn't ever meant to be practiced in isolation.
Yeah, I think it's like, it is, as you said, like its goals are like being better at your job and being a more productive worker consumer. And that's the best it offers. That you know, assuming it even does that, which I'm not actually convinced it does. But even if that was all it was, like, you know, what's the point of that? You know, why do you want to be a better worker consumer?
Yeah, but doesn't it partly show just how shrunken spiritually, you know, modern society is, isn't it? So you got this Buddhist tradition that can free you completely from suffering in this life and all future lives, and free all beings from suffering. You know, there's this huge power and you know, potential for good from Buddhism. Obviously, you need to practice it, and you need the right goal. You know, and that's in meditation. In that context, is a key part of that goal of achieving Buddha for benefit of all beings. And it's part of something so vast and almost unimaginably vast, isn't it? And now in the modern society, we've shrunk it down to being, you know, how can I do my job a bit better and not be so stressed? It's like that, and people, and often in the West, these are people that, you know, teach meditation, that they're spiritual people. They frame themselves, oh, I'm a spiritual person, I do meditation, I'm really interested in a bit of Buddhism, a bit of Hinduism, a bit of this, a bit of that. And it's like they haven't even got an inkling almost of what Buddhism is about and how profound and vast it is. And it's just shrunken down into like, yeah, and I go to the gym in the morning, do a bit of meditation, and yeah, and I eat really healthy.
For me, it seems there are some that I think there are problems in the way we assimilate Dharma. To begin with, Dharma is so radically different than everything we're used to from our ideologies, from our past ideas, and yet we are trying so often to deny that radical difference, to assimilate Dharma to our already prepared Western ideas. And in doing that, we'll rob Dharma of its power to speak directly to us, to change our heart. If Dharma is nothing more than what we've already got, why would we bother with it at all?
It's such a grift. Like I downloaded one of these apps to see like what's actually going on, and it was such a grift. Like, first of all, it was really expensive, like for what you got, which was basically a few sort of guided meditations. And there was this guy. He showed up on a video, and he looked the part. Like he had this story to tell about how he went to the Himalayas and studied with Tibetan masters, and then brought his wisdom back to the West. And you can just imagine the reality of the situation, like, you know, where he's just painting himself out to be like Eddie Murphy in The Golden Child, you know. And then the meditation itself was just like, they kept on going on about, are you sitting, feel 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 your weight of your body on your cushion.
And now easily and gently bringing your attention to your left foot. Just noticing what it feels like in the left foot. Breathing into the left foot.
And they kept on sort of, basically it was just like, concentrate on how heavy you are and the feeling like of sitting. It was quite absurd, quite weird.
But then they were able to set themselves up, like you said, like, you know, with some sort of story and narrative that puts them in this position that they're a spiritual teacher that people can rely on.
It's the same with like this Sam Harris, like he's one of these massive kind of podcast gurus, you know, online with a scientist, you know, meditation with a scientific twist to appeal to the scientifically minded and anti-religious. And you listen to him talking about his meditation experiences. Anyone who talks about their profound experiences in an unprofound way, you know, you sort of, I think you can quite quickly recognize them as beginners.
I mean, what I'm about to teach you is, without question, the most important thing I've ever learned in my life, right? And I had to go to the East, essentially, to learn it. And you might just gently close your eyes. And just take a few deep breaths. And just feel the weight of your body.
But it's difficult, isn't it? For us, we were able to spot it. But for most people who are new to Buddhism or, you know, don't know much about it, it's so easy for them to fall for it. I think that's all there is. Either that Buddhism is just about, you know, you do some meditation and great, or even worse, you know, you don't need Buddhism, you just do this meditation and you can achieve enlightenment. When enlightenment's changed from being this like complete omniscience to being, you have a pretty cool meditation experience that was quite blissful, man. Now you're enlightened. It's like, it's just remarkable how it's, because I guess the biggest problem, isn't it? One of the problems Lama Jumpa points out is that it stops people from connecting with Buddhism. Because, you know, they'll think they're practicing Buddhism and they're being sold this watered down version, which doesn't really help them much at all. And when it doesn't help, they sort of give it up and they throw away Buddhism as well as this, you know, meditation thing that was posited as being all there is about you need to know from Buddhism.
Mindfulness is this very powerful tool that is useful in context. And the context is then to do insight meditation and, you know, to look at your moral conduct and the view of the world. And when we talk about insight meditation, which is also the other form of meditation, we're talking about the view of reality, you know, breaking down, looking at things like subject and object and looking for those things. That's the problem with just mindfulness on its own, is that it's not Buddhism. And that, like you said, Paul, it then makes people think, oh, well, I know about Buddhism because I've done mindfulness meditation because it's everywhere. It's, you know, it's ubiquitous in our culture. And they think that they know a little bit about Buddhism, but they don't. And that's the real corruption. That's the real tragedy.
People used to ask me about this, and I often would say, you know, is meditation helpful, you know, for de-stressing or something? And I say, yeah, it's probably good, you know. And I used to think that, you know, maybe there's some secular benefits for people maybe do some meditation, but reading this chapter and think about it, I'm not sure if it could be, you know, I think Lama Jumpa implies in some places that it could be worse for people in a way, because, you know, in Buddhism, isn't it, everything's taught, the outcomes all align to what our intention is. And so Buddhism, like you said, Paul, is on the basis of moral ethics, hear, think, meditate. You know, but ethics is sort of the grounding and our intention. Why are we practicing meditation at all? In Buddhism, we always start every practice with refuge and bodhicitta, the wish to achieve Buddhahood for benefit of others. So you're always framed as something, a good intention. Whereas nowadays, people are trying to use meditation to forward their what their plans and their ambitions are. So often those ambitions are generally about personal success, it's personal self-aggrandizement, maybe fame. Well, they're sort of just really worldly, quite negative intentions, as it were, behind it. And then I think there's a reference how, in some ways, practicing meditation can solidify these delusions and make them more solid in a way. And you get sort of instead of dissolving delusions, actually props them up or makes it even more real and makes the self even more solid. I mean, what do you think?
Well, it reminded me of that phrase back from chapter 1, I think it is, that Lama Jampa says there was a distinction between Buddhism makes you free from self, but the late 60s culture was more free the self, free the self to become this huge self. I was thinking, I think what's positive in it, and I think there is maybe something positive in it, which could be this. It really took off, although its origins are in the McMindfulness in the 1970s. It really took off in the last sort of 10, 15 years. I think that's no coincidence that's been I think the iPhone came out in 2006 or 7, and so cell phones, the mobile phones, and the massive increase in the compulsion of social media. The mindfulness thing has grown partly as a reaction to that, and in a way, what's positive about it is it's a recognition of the incredibly damaging states of mind that social media and cell phones get you into. But so from that perspective, you could say there is a positive there, and it's good that people sit and experience space, even if there's no ethical discipline or wisdom. But the problem, of course, is from the broader Buddhist perspective, is all you're doing. The best you could hope for then is to go back to sort of 2005 or 1997, when we were still full of delusions, defilements, and we still had our busyness, our Western modern busyness. It was just slightly less intense because we didn't have cell phones or social media. So.
I came into Buddhism through mindfulness meditation before I'd taken refuge. And I was interested in it because I wanted to try and calm my mind down. I was like a nihilistic, neurotic teenager. And I knew that, I had an intuition that mindfulness would kind of help. I wanted to try and calm my mind down because it was all over the place. But when I started practicing mindfulness, it led me to the obvious conclusion that a lot of my neurotic thoughts, my monkey mind, was because I didn't have an ethical underpinning to my life. I was a nihilist. I'd been raised a Christian. I rejected that because I didn't believe in God. And with it, I rejected morality as well. I was just like, no, I'm out for myself. But when I started practicing mindfulness, I started to say, well, possibly some of the reasons why I'm in this neurotic state of mind is because I really don't have any kind of ethical compass, moral compass in my life. And that led me from mindfulness to then start practicing, taking karma seriously. So I don't think it has to inevitably be this kind of magnification of the self in a negative way. I think a lot of people can join the dots and go from mindfulness to a genuine interest and engagement with Buddhism.
Yeah, it's interesting hearing your path and how you moved on to understanding the importance of morality. Because, like Adrian, I think your point is true. Our lives are so agitated, isn't it? Things move so fast now, and there's so many distractions, moment to moment, and people therefore really need some way of unplugging and so on. But in the absence of ethics, though, then they unplug for a bit and then plug back in, and there's just more of the same. In a way, it's a bit like, in some ways, isn't the ethics bit more important than the meditation and reorientating people's lives in terms of, even basic notions of ethics, in terms of, generosity for others and kindness to others, and those sorts of things. In a way, people might be better off with more of that.
I think so. I think, the classic quote from Vasubandhu, which I think is somewhere else in this book, is on the basis of moral discipline, practice, hearing, thinking, and meditating. Moral discipline or ethics is the indispensable part, without which nothing can happen. Meditation is somewhat optional, and that's how it's always been done in Buddhist cultures and societies, which were structured around the sort of two principles of the monastic part and the lay part. And most lay people would be far too busy, especially in non-modern societies, very little free time. Very, very little free time to practice meditation. In fact, something Lama Jampa has pointed out to a lot of people, because a lot of people get very excited about becoming a monk, don't they, in the West? I'll become a monk, and they imagine then that was some sort of, again, it's like the golden child, they'll get spiritual magic powers or something. But Lama Jampa has pointed out that actually monastic life in Asian countries was extremely busy. There was very little time for most monks to practice meditation. It was somewhat rare. So the meditation part was quite rare and exceptional. It's quite difficult to be able to practice it. But ethics and moral discipline was absolutely indispensable. Path can't even begin without that as a prerequisite.
Yeah, but ethics is a difficult one sometimes to pin down. I mean, in Buddhism, it's very well defined, and there's teachings on it, so you can begin to do it. From a Western point of view, often like with Norin, and I was the same, having rejected Christianity, you're left in a bit of a moral vacuum, and then you usually fill it with politics. And then, the politics, this is the right politics. I believe in this political thing because that's better for everyone. And if you don't agree with me, that's because you're bad. And if you agree with me, you're good. But there's something here about meditation and its relationship with politics. There's a quote here, just read it out, about the style of meditation in the West often grounds itself in a melange of self-indulgence and gesture politics masquerading as compassion. And compassion, it must be said, that cannot see beyond self-regard. The result is the same vapid posturing that dominates so much of contemporary culture. Because the next paragraph as well is interesting, because it is that point about our society being so consumerist now. And there it says that meditation will become a mere app for stress-free living. And it will simply accommodate the harmful consumption-driven lifestyles that so characterize much life in wealthy countries.
Yeah.
And then it will serve as a reinforcing agent to stabilize delusion.
It's almost like the very idea of a spiritual tradition and a spiritual path is becoming inconceivable to people. And their only way of relating to the world is as it says here, how does this fit into my consumption pattern? And of course, with Buddhism, the answer is it doesn't. Actually, your consumption pattern has to fit into Buddhism, and it's going to have to change a bit probably. But that's becoming increasingly difficult for a lot of people to expand their view to grasp that.
It's so seductive, isn't it, in a way, because people can have a lot of pleasure, sensation of pleasure, because we've got this society which is pretty rich and pretty good at creating stuff which is titillating and engaging and gives people a sense of pleasure. And so everyone can move through life completely distracted from what's transcendent and important. And it's only then when they hit some sort of tragedy, isn't it? Some sort of real suffering, that suddenly, obviously, that consumerist approach doesn't give them any inner strength to deal with it, and they don't know what to do.
Yeah,
maybe it's Buddhism, maybe not, but
even then, as soon as a little bit of time passes, they can actually go straight back to the shallow consumption-driven lifestyle, and that profound experience can leave no imprint, sadly, because they didn't know how to fit it into their pattern of consumption.
This whole paragraph was a bit loaded, spicy. to be honest.
Well, there's another one as well, which is around here, which is also quite interesting. Talking about meditation without, moral discipline. He says it easily absorbs the values of the most unsavory elements of our culture, whether it be ruthlessness towards life of the unwanted young or the old, that dresses itself up as liberation, or the patrician unconcern with those left behind today by post-industrialization.
That's the bit I was talking about. One of the bits I was talking about, the spiciness. Yeah. Well, I had to look up what patrician means.
Me too.
I'm a bit ignorant. Right, and it means like the nobility. Right.
Yeah, it's the opposite of the plebeians in Roman society, patricians and the plebeians.
It's very, like, I went up to Portland the other day, and it was like there were tents everywhere, tent city, and it just kind of blew my mind how the stark contrast of it. There's a lady in one of my college classes who's from Syria, and I asked her last week, I said, do you have this problem back in Syria? Do you have homelessness to the scale that we have over here? Is it just like trying to figure out, it's like a global thing, or is it? And she was like, no, we don't. And she asked me, it's funny because she said, is it so bad over here because you've legalized marijuana? I just thought that was funny that she was looking for that as a basis for it. And it's obviously not, because we're such, I think, we're such a consumer driven, there's something fundamentally wrong with
yeah, there's something fundamentally wrong. I mean, it veers a little bit into politics dangerously.
It does, yeah.
But it's a bit like, but I think it's more like a symptom of this spiritual depravity of our society, that this homeless problem, because a lot of people are becoming more unhinged. I think there's something like 75-80% of the homeless in LA have mental illness, and about a similar number have drug abuse problems, but the two often go hand in hand. But I think that level of people getting so unhinged, to your point, is the hypocrisy, but it's quite a subtle one, because it's dressed up as compassion. Let's help the homeless, when really what they're doing is encouraging homelessness and drug abuse and this sort of underbelly, this sort of subclass. And they can still feel good about how they're being compassionate, and they'll say how much they care. Lama Jumpa talks a little bit about what meditation is in the Buddhist tradition traditionally, in terms of calm abiding meditation or shamatha, and insight meditation or vipassana. So Adrian, do you want to explain a little bit more about that?
Shamatha means calm abiding, which means sort of stilling the mind, or a steady one-pointed concentration, not wavering or fluctuating. And after that comes the vipassana meditation, where you've achieved enough stability through shamatha to focus, to practice analysis of the true nature of reality. And that, as Lama Jumpa describes in the book, that you begin with analyzing objects, which we initially, without analyzing, we assume that they're real, substantial, inherently existing objects in the world. And the ultimate expression of that in modern Western society is materialism. The ultimate reality is material substance. But we analyze that through this vipassana meditation, and through analyzing it, you can begin to see that it's actually a projection of mind. All of these things, like material substance, all these conceptions that we have, are dependent upon mind and are not ultimately real from their own side. And then, as he says, after that, you can actually continue for even more profound understanding, which is to analyze mind itself, and see that also doesn't have existence from its own side, is also dependent upon projections. And in this way, nothing is actually inherently established as an ultimately existent entity. And that's the profound view of Buddhist meditation. But what's happened in the modern West with Buddhism is that there's, of course, with the general sort of imbalance and disorder of society, is one of those other 2 points is emphasized to the exclusion of the other. So you either focus solely on the resting shamatha side and never go on to actually look into things through analysis, or you focus solely on the analysis, Vipassana, without having first developed stability and one-pointedness, in which case it just becomes an intellectual. What's being called Vipassana is actually just an intellectual exercise, just thinking, which is not Vipassana. Vipassana means insight, which means seeing, not thinking.
Okay. And then Lama Jumpa does mention as well. So we've talked quite a bit about the sort of more secular Buddhism, secular meditation and the faults of that. I think Lama Jumpa also does mention, though, that there are some purported, Buddhist teachers who then teach that all you need is meditation. You can achieve enlightenment and peace and so on just through meditation. I mean, is that correct, or is that not correct?
I wanted to backtrack and talk a little bit about what Adrian had just said about insight meditation first, if that's all right. Just because that hasn't picked up that in Western culture. You don't see the secular view of insight meditation being picked up. It's mindfulness alone, so it can be redirected to its own secular goals. And so the connection with mindfulness and insight meditation from a Buddhist perspective is just as you outlined. You look at the nature of phenomena and see it has no inherent basis, it's illusory. So when you take something like somebody comes to Buddhism, like we were asked recently by someone about, what's the Buddhist view on how do you approach things like depression? You don't give it any credence. It's like the thought that pops up in your mind when you're doing shamatha meditation, your monkey mind. You don't follow that and then solidify it and then use it to say, oh yeah, this is myself, I'm depressed, or I have this issue, I clung onto it. You use insight to deconstruct it.
Where did those moments of real powerful happiness come from that occasionally I experience in this life? We'll find that they're all characterized by a self-forgetfulness, where we've actually forgot for a moment our own pressing agendas and simply extended ourselves in kindness and concern, in openness to others.
I just think that there's a disconnect when you between morality seems to have become a very confusing and almost like a dirty word these days. And I think that's why mindfulness in dialogue is taken off.
I'm not sure if there's a few interesting things there, but I'm not sure it has a dirty word. I'm not sure. Like today we did 6 Perfections on class and we spoke a lot about morality. And I think, and no one seems to flinch or whatever, but I think people think they are moral. That's the thing, is that because morality now is not about so much how you behave with others in these small ways. Morality is, yes, I want to end poverty. And yes, I want the environment to be saved. And, it's morality has got bound up with politics, basically. If you ascribe to the right political view, that is being moral. And if you have a political view that says everyone should end poverty and be equal, then that's a moral position. And none of them have any demands on you as an individual in terms of how you interact with people.
Yeah, but that's not morality, man. That's just virtue signaling. That's just politics. That's just.
I know, but I was just saying is I think people were really confused with that. It's difficult to not conflate the two.
There's a pervasive morality, which is the default morality of a bunch of opinions, moral opinions, which everyone is supposed to hold, around, as you say, like, climate change, beginning of life, end of life, the poor, and globalization issues. The reason why it seems to be why Buddhism is asking for something is because the Buddhist morality doesn't exactly correspond point for point with modern neoliberal morality. In fact, in several important points such as abortion, it's actually contradictory to it.
Can I make one point about mindfulness, though, which I don't think we talked about, which is moving up, because what Norin was saying reminded me that, because mindfulness nowadays seems to be this notion that, you should be aware of what's happening in your mind and somehow that gives you some power over what you do and so on. But it's like Norin was saying, they take these thoughts and so on too seriously. It's like being mindful and then think, oh God, I thought that, or what does that mean? And why did I think that? And
one shouldn't be anxiously scanning one's practice to see if it's getting better and better every day. that way, actually, it will never bring about any benefits, because we're grasping at it. We're grasping at signs of progress, and therefore trying to, as it were, our ego is trying to take hold of them and build up a new identity based on them. And anyway, one meditation session and another meditation session are always different. Different things arise. We may have a good run, so to speak, when for a few days meditation seems perfect, everything is quiet, still, and so on. And then just like that kind of steadiness and stability is disrupted, and we feel like we're back to square one. A wise meditator is used to this. They've been around this particular dance hall hundreds, thousands of times, so they give up scanning and looking for progress in that way. And that is actually a sign of progress, that one is content with just practicing day in, day out, as a beginner, again and again, starting again with whatever is there, whatever is arising to mind. So it looks small, but it's actually an enormous change. A whole bunch of neurosis and tightness has gone when we find this ease in our relationship with our practice. So although the best sign is really how we are with others, this is also some small sign of progress.
And so I've had some people come to class who've done a lot of this mindfulness meditation, and it seems to just tie them in these conceptual knots and make them even more neurotic and take things even more seriously. Versus in Buddhism, being mindful, well, there's a few things, isn't it? One, when we're doing shamatha, we dissolve things. You know, you don't cling to anything. You let everything arise and liberate itself, as it were. But with mindfulness, I think Lama Jampa, I don't think it's in this chapter, but he does talk a little bit about how mindfulness originally in the Buddhist context has a sense of memory. It's remembering what we're about. And mindfulness for Buddhism means if we're practicing Buddhism, we've taken a bodhisattva vow, we've vowed to work for the benefits of others and not harm anyone and all these sorts of things. Mindfulness is remembering what we're meant to be doing. It's remembering don't harm others, remembering practice virtue, remember, purify non-virtue. Mindfulness has a purpose, and it supports us on the path for our goal of Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. Whereas when you detach it from that moral basis and that context, it just becomes it seems to be like this way of getting people even more neurotic.
Conscience. What a thing. If you believe you got a conscience, it'll pester you to death. But if you don't believe you got one, what can it do to you? Makes me sick, all this talking and fussing about nonsense.
Well, am I meant to wrap up? I'm the host, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's good chatting about meditation. And then next session, we'll be moving into wise compassion. So have a good one.
Thanks a lot.